Hi, I'm Greg Denning, and I'm so excited to talk about this with you today. You know, if I had to step back and you and I were having this conversation, and you say, what's the biggest problem in society? And yeah, you look around. There's addiction. There's violence. There's depression and suicide. There's poverty. There's neglect. There's families are falling apart. And I think in all of that, I sincerely believe this. I think all of that is from a lack of real education. And honestly, I think the fact that people lack a real education. Now you're saying, well, wait a minute. Everyone's going to school and they're getting their diplomas and their degrees and there's lots of education. Well, what that is schooling. And there's a huge difference between schooling and education. I think that's part of the big problem is that most people have no idea what a real education even is and what it looks like. And too few of us have studied education throughout history. And so I wanted to share that and talk about this. We've got to get an idea what a great education is and go after it. And what does that have to do with all those social ills? As we get a phenomenal education, it changes you. It's changed me. I've been studying voraciously outside of school for 20 years and just reading endlessly, constantly. And I travel and I think. I actually set aside time to think and to write and to study in all the areas. And we'll talk about that. I'll tell you more about that. But I want to point out three main areas of education, three types of education. One is commonly called like a conveyor belt education, and that's what most of us know. You go to school, you get good grades, you get out, you get your job, right? It's just conveyor belt education. It's a minimum standard. And you say, what are you talking about? I took honors classes and school is hard. It's way beyond that even, right? I have an advanced degree. Well, that's awesome, but it doesn't stop there. There's never a graduation from education. And so the first is just conveyor belt. It's a minimum standard. It's teaching you what to think. You learn something, you take a test on it, and you just regurgitate. That's all that is. The next is professional training, where you learn a specific profession, and they really train you when to think. If this comes in with this diagnosis, then you do this treatment. It's just really when to think, and it's more advanced training. And then there's leadership education. And that's the one that most people don't know about. Leadership education is really learning how to think. It's the basis of what's called a liberal arts education. And that's the best. It's a classical education. It's studying the very best classics in all fields, in math, in science, in writing, in history, in social science, and biology, and all of it, combining into one great whole, right? It's taking all truth and combining it in one great whole and getting a phenomenal world-class education. It takes a lifetime. It doesn't stop. I think the ideal education, and I didn't get it. I went through the conveyor belt system. I went to government school and then had to get my education afterwards, and I'm still fighting for it and going for it. I get up every morning really early and I study all day. I'm constantly reading. I always have a book in my hand. Any free time, I'm listening to an audio program or reading a book or out having experience. I'm asking people. I'm curious. Just yesterday, I was with a specialist here. My neighbor is a brain specialist for peak performance and how the brain functions and works with dopamines and serotonin and interaction in your frontal lobe. I mean, it's awesome, right? And so we're always learning. But the ideal for me would be, by the time you're 25, you've read 2,000 of the best books written. I mean, there's no time for trash. You read the great stuff. And every decade after that, you read at least 1,000 books. So at 35, I've read 3,000. At 45, I read 4,000. 55, 5,000, and you keep going because you're always learning from the best. Now, I haven't done that. I'm behind. I'm behind on that, and so I got to do some serious catching up, and I'm doing it. I'm reading voraciously. But if we can understand what a real education is, and what I like to call bibliotherapy, right? It's therapy that comes from books. As we learn about these things, we change. It improves our relationships. It improves our health. It improves our understanding. It helps us overcome addiction and bad habit. It heals families and marriages. It heals social ills. But seek after a great education. And that's why I do mentoring. So I do educational mentoring. I mentor both youth and adults, and really pushing them to learn how to think, to acquire knowledge, to make changes, to get education from all sources, and really get a broad and healthy and deep understanding. So if you've got caught in that trap of, yeah, I went to school, I got my education, set that aside and really go after it. Get a phenomenal education, and it will change your life, and you will become a leader in your industry, in your work, in your family, in society, wherever you are. You'll lead out because you really understand what an education truly is. So go out and get it. Reach upward. And be sure to go to gregdenning.com and sign in, put your name and email in there for free trainings on mentoring, on education, on families, and really dig in there. I'm going to give lots of videos and lots of trainings how to create for yourself and gain your own phenomenal education. I mean, you can do it. You can own it. You take that accountability and that responsibility and make it happen. And it's awesome. It makes for a phenomenal life. Reach upward.